Hello and welcome to Thrive in 5. Last week we discovered that shalom, peace, at least in the Jewish conception, is a lot more than just a lack of hostilities, but rather a sense of integration, of harmony. And that's true on an inner level as well. That inner peace is really a tremendous sense of integrity, feeling aligned with our higher ideals. But we were left with a question, which is that's a pretty high bar. Most of us aren't going to always be aligned. We're going to fall short. And so are we doomed to feel an inner sense of conflict all the time? And my answer to that would be yes, but. The yes part is that it's true. We are going to fall short, and we're going to feel pangs of conscience at times. We're gonna sometimes get a sense that we've missed the mark. But we don't have to put ourselves through the kind of pain and suffering that most people put themselves through. When I went to Jerusalem years ago to discover Judaism for myself, I encountered a society that inspired me. People who wanted to make themselves better, who wanted to improve the world, a system of morality, character development. But there was a downside to it, because as I learned these books and I compared myself to the high bar, I saw pretty clearly that I fell short in a lot of areas, and I started to feel negative toward myself, start to beat myself up, and really, almost get depressed. At the time, I thought it was a mitzvah. It was a good thing to do, because after all, how else do you take responsibility? How else do you improve yourself? You got to do teshuvah, repent, feel remorse. And it wasn't until years later that I discovered that the very same system, Judaism, that brought me those high ideals is really quite opposed to that approach. In fact, Judaism teaches us that we're each created with a Yetzer Hara, which is sort of like our own little, evil inclination, we call it. It's our own ability to be our own worst enemy. And we're taught that the number one tactic of that part of ourselves is actually to make ourselves feel bad. In fact, one of the names for the Yetzer Hara is the Nachash, the serpent. The very same guy that tripped us up in the Garden of Eden, he's still tripping us up today. But you see, the thing about a serpent or a snake is that it's not the bite that kills, it's the poison. And that's the way the Yetzer Hara works as well. It bites us, it gets us to trip and make mistakes. But that's not what kills us, it's the poison. It's the self-judgment, it's the negativity. And the reason it does it is because ultimately it wants us to be demoralized. It wants us to lose hope and to give up. Ann Landers, the great advice columnist, was once asked, "What's the number one question your readers ask you?" And she answered, "What's the matter with me?" It's so common for us to have all sorts of thinking about ourselves and our own shortcomings and failures. I once had a client who not only was he upset about his failures, but he was upset because he was upset. And then he was upset because he was upset because he was upset. And it may sound like a joke, but this is what people do to themselves. And ultimately, it's incredibly debilitating. It's like carrying a huge amount of psychological weight upon your shoulders. It's like a psychological autoimmune disease. We attack ourselves. And it's crazy, but we do it because we think we're doing the right thing. So how do we improve ourselves if it's not by beating ourselves up? And I'm hoping that we've all had the experience of simply, humbly owning the fact that we've fallen short sometimes. There are times when we do this, when we just have a certain humility and we're able to admit, something, I blew it, I take responsibility, and what can I do to fix it? And if we've ever had such an experience, and hopefully we have, you'll know that's not a bad feeling. It's actually a very nice feeling. But more than that, it's an empowering feeling, because when we beat ourselves up, ultimately we're disempowering ourselves. We're telling ourselves we're damaged goods, we're not capable. But when we recognize that fundamentally good and lovable people make mistakes, which is basically a sane way of looking at ourselves, then we're able to take ownership and responsibility in a way that really allows us to move forward and make progress in our lives. So next time you feel yourself getting on yourself, next time you feel that little inner toxicity, be wise to it. Realize you're not doing yourself a favor, you're not doing the world a favor, you're actually pulling the rug right out from underneath your own feet. And you may not be able to stop yourself. It's tempting. We do it in a very convincing way. But at least realize that it's not a good idea. And hopefully that'll open you up to the more genuine sense of ownership for what you've done and be empowered. Thanks, and we'll hopefully see you next week.